Good morning, Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. And we're in the Gospel of Mark, and we're in chapter 6, and we are in the immediate aftermath of the feeding of the 5,000. And so we're going to read verses 45 through 52. Immediately, there's that word again. Immediately, he made his disciples get into the boat and to go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself sent the multitude away. And after bidding them farewell, he departed to the mountain to pray. And when it was evening, and the boat was in the midst of the sea, and he was alone on the land, and seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the 4th watch of the night, he comes to them walking on the sea, acting like he intended to pass by them. When they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were frightened. But immediately he spoke with them and said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind immediately stopped, and they were greatly astonished, for they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Not only did they not get any insight from the miracle of the loaves, they didn't get any insight from the miracles they themselves had performed. Well, John is the one who tells us why Jesus puts them in a boat and sends them off and immediately dismisses the crowd. And it's because they want to take Jesus by force. The crowd wants to take Jesus by force and make him an earthly king. And he's going to have none of it. So the first thing he does is to get these obtuse apostles in a boat and send them across the sea so they don't get any other goofy ideas in their head. Then he tells the people, go home. Go home. And then he goes up on the mountain to pray. And then Matthew tells us the whole bit about Peter wanting to get out of the boat and walking to Jesus on the water and sinking. And I think there's a good reason why this doesn't factor into the telling of this story. And if Peter and the preaching of Peter is the source, the primary source of Mark's gospel, which I believe it is, the only historical references that we have say that it is, then it's interesting that throughout this gospel, anytime Peter features in a story, he features less prominently in Mark than he does the other Gospels, because Peter doesn't make his preaching in this story about himself in any way, to the point that John, more frequently than anyone else, but the other Gospel writers too, the other two Synoptic Gospel writers, will mention Peter in a more prominent way. Luke tells us that Peter and Jesus' eyes met whenever he denied him the 3rd time. Matthew's the one who tells us about Peter walking on the water. But John, more than any of the other ones, tells us about his dear friend and the prominent role he played in among the apostles in a way that the others don't. Anyway, but we do get some detail here that we don't have, even though it is the briefest account of this event of the Gospels. We get this, that when they see Jesus acted like he was going to walk past them, which would have been cool. They would have watched him walk on the water and beat them to the other shore. And maybe that's the very thing Jesus expected them to see and to understand and to marvel at. But they didn't recognize that it was Jesus. Why not? They've seen him raise the dead. They've seen him feed 15,000 people with a little boy's lunch. They themselves have been empowered by him to heal the sick. And yet, when they see him walking on the water, they panic. And they think it's a specter, something supernatural, and they cry out in fear. And when he gets in the boat and the winds completely stop, and Matthew's gospel in this instance is much more vivid than Mark's is at making this palpable for us, giving us the sight, the sound, the feel of what was happening, the spray of the water, the sound of the wind, the seeing the waves, feeling the waves, using at least 4 of our 5 senses to experience this. But when he gets in the boat and this violent wind goes calm, and let's not forget this is the second time Jesus has done this, they're astonished because they don't get it. And the Gospels are clear about this. They don't get it. They don't really even get it after the resurrection. They don't get it really until the Holy Spirit, envelops them and empowers them to go out and preach the gospel. And of course, we get this in this story as well. Okay, we're going to pick up with verse 53 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.